You know, I've been rolling this around. I see this in my own family. I know so many people, some of the younger people who work, with us and for us. This is, and it hit me today. I mean, I've kind of said this before, but it just really hit me hard today about student debt. That literally never in the history of the developed world, never before, never in the United States, not in any other developed nation, never in the history of the developed world has an entire generation had to go into debt just to get an education and thus get a job. Until now. Back in January, 31-year-old Tony Muzzatti, who at the time owed around $60,000 in student loan debt to Sallie Mae, always made his payments on time, was told that he had to immediately make a payment of $10,000 or face asset seizures. Why? Well, because his grandmother, who was the co-signer on his student loans, just died. Christopher Kibler was told by Sallie Mae that he had to immediately pay back nearly $22,000 in student loan debts after his father, the co-signer in his loans, had passed away. I'm the co-signer on one of my kids' student loans. God forbid, Muzzatti and Kibler are just two of the many victims of what the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau refers to as auto defaults, when banks immediately say that private student loan debts are in default because of the death or bankruptcy of a co-signer. This auto default practice is just one of the many ways that big banks and Wall Street executives are making billions of dollars off an entire generation of struggling, debt-ridden Americans. We have $1.18 trillion in outstanding student loan debt in the United States. We've never, ever had anything even remotely close to this. There are more than 40 million Americans with student loan debt. 40 million. That's more than the entire population of Canada, Poland, North Korea, Australia, and more than 200 other countries. I didn't know there were 200 countries. It's only 197. I guess there must be. And of those 40 million borrowers, almost 7 million have already defaulted on their debt. I mean, this is how bad it's gotten. The average 25-year-old American who has student debt, the average debt that kid is holding has risen, 25, whatever, has risen 91% just in the last 10 years. Average college debt per person is over $23,000. And the result of this is that an entire generation of Americans is completely screwed. They can't start a family. They can't buy a house. And if you don't, typically people who are retiring in their 60s, the equity that they have, this is where most American household equity exists. The equity that they have is in their homes. And the way that you get to the point where you've got enough equity that, you've got a home that's worth, when you retire, maybe borrowing against or selling or, whatever, some equity, is you buy your first house in your 20s. And then over the next 40 years, as you're making payments, you eventually pay it off. Or you pay, you keep moving up in housing, and each step along the way, you get a little more equity, and you roll it into the next house, and you roll it into the next house. And we actually subsidize this with our tax code. But now we have an entire generation of Americans. Literally an entire generation of Americans. People typically younger than 30 years old, many of them, most of them under 25 years old, who don't have the ability to build that kind of equity. And don't have the ability to build that kind of equity because they're, they can't take on a $70,000 mortgage because they've got $30,000 in student debts. The national average is in the high 20s, like 27,000 or something. This is a morally criminal conspiracy that's been going on for the past 33 years, ever since Ronald Reagan came to Washington, and it's been a three-step process. First, as governor of California, Reagan did away with that state's free college education program that had let tens of thousands of Californians get an affordable and quality education. Others across the country followed his lead. As soon as he came to Washington, Reagan continued this all-out assault on affordable college education by slashing federal aid to higher education institutions across the country, including America's land-grant colleges that have been providing affordable and quality education since they were first established by Abraham Lincoln, the Morrill Act, 1862. When Reagan came into office, only about 20% of the cost of tuition cost of going to college was paid as tuition by the student. The other 80% was paid by governments and endowments. Today, it's the exact reverse. So all these students are in debt. We've got an entire generation that can't afford to start a house, can't afford to start a family, can't afford to buy a house, can't afford to, by the time they're 50, 60, they're not going to have the equity to retire that the generations before them had. No other industrialized country in the world has indebted an entire generation just for student loan debts. Next, Reagan laid the groundwork for the federal government to get involved in student loan business. And thanks to his new ed policies and putting Bill Bennett in as his hostile education secretary of labor, the federal government has had an incentive to hand out loans to hundreds of thousands of students because of interest on those loans. It'll be government revenue. This was the whole Reagan thing. And finally, our backwards trade policies that have been in place for the last 33 years have also devastated America's lost generation. Believe it or not, there used to be a time in this country when you could graduate from high school, get a good-paying blue-collar job, and provide for your family and save for your retirement. But thanks to decades of job-killing trade policies, that's no longer the case. Now, in order to become part of the middle class, to have any kind of a shot at the American dream, you have to go to college, which means that you have to strap yourself with thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt to get that degree and get that white-collar job. So forget about getting married and getting a house and starting to build the kind of equity that you'll be able to retire with when you're in your 60s. And the worst part of all this is that we Americans, uniquely, we're the only country in the world that has this problem. We have done this to ourselves. We shot ourselves in the foot by listening 33 years ago to Ronald Reagan, by buying this whole Reaganomics idea that education should be a commodity and something that somebody can make a buck off of, instead of thinking that education is part of the commons. We need to own up to our own mistakes. We need to start calling America's student loan debt crisis what it really is, a massive, devastating, trillion-dollar, morally criminal conspiracy committed by Wall Street bankers, libertarian billionaires, and Reaganomics devotees. And then maybe we can undo some of the damage to an entire generation. We should declare a debt jubilee on all outstanding student loan debt in America. Just wipe the slate clean. They shouldn't have had to go to debt in the first place. Abraham Lincoln started the nationwide free schools. Thomas Jefferson, on his tombstone, he said it was more important to put on his tombstone that he started the University of Virginia, which was America's first free college, than that he was president of the United States. And his tombstone, which he designed, says he was the author of the Virginia Declaration of Religious Freedom, the Declaration of Independence, and the founder of the University of Virginia. Free college has been part of America's tradition literally since the Jefferson presidency, and Ronald Reagan started taking it apart. We need to relieve millions of Americans from this crippling debt so that they can begin starting families, invest in their homes, start building equity. We need to make a public college education free to every American who qualifies for it. That would cost us less over the next decade than just the Iraq War has cost us. It is insane where our priorities are at. Well, Senator Sanders.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Bernie has some thoughts on where we're at with carbon in the air. This is going to be interesting. Stick around.